Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, the sanctuary for wellness professionals like therapists, coaches, creators, and more who are looking to over-deliver to their clients.
We uncover the truth behind cutting-edge wellness products by going straight to the founder.
We use our backgrounds in neuroscience, chemical engineering, and marketing to ask the hard questions in order to eliminate bias, misinformation, and fancy marketing language.
Allowing you to make better wellness decisions and recommendations for yourself and your clients.
So if you're a leader in the health and wellness space, welcome. This podcast was designed for you.
Join us every week for interviews that will change how you think about wellness.
All right, welcome back to the Decision Lab podcast, everybody. Pumped to have you here. Today we are talking to Dr. Emily, aka the Movement Longevity Doctor. What a name. Emily is a functional podiatrist, human movement specialist, author of Barefoot Strong, and CEO and founder of Naboso Technology, with over 23 years of experience in the health and fitness industry. Dr. Emily is positioned herself as a global leader on barefoot science. Can't wait to talk about that. Foot to core integration, sensory integration, and so much more. She actively sees patients out of her office in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well as virtually, and takes great pride in approaching all patients through a functional approach with the integration of neuromuscular control, biopsychosocial influences, corrective exercise, and even stem cell therapy. Dr. Emily has presented her research and barefoot education, both nationally and internationally, to over 25,000 professionals with her barefoot training specialist program in over 40 countries, translated into 50 languages. One of the most intense intros we've had thus far on the podcast. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Emily.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Man, I need to take a couple breaths. You've got lots of stuff on the CV. I'm excited to chat as someone who is standing on your socks and holding one of your neuroballs in my hand right now. This will be a fun time.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Emily, tell us what got you interested in human movement, posture, and barefoot science?
Yeah. So my background is actually in athletics. I was a gymnast for 13 years, competitive gymnast. And then I got into the fitness industry. And when I was in the fitness industry, absolutely loved it, loved movement, loved teaching classes, etc. But I actually started getting hurt because I was coming off of being such a highly competitive athlete. And I realized that I could not be doing a career that used my body as the tool, right? Such as teaching classes and the physicality of fitness. So I went back to graduate school. But when I was looking at the graduate schools, I know that I wanted to stay within this movement category, movement space. I wanted to stay within the fitness industry because fitness is it just speaks to my soul. And when I'm teaching classes or in a gym or just talking about human movement, it just lights me up. And that's really where I came into podiatry. Podiatry is traditionally taught very surgically, and I used my background of being a gymnast and fitness and movement to really shape the way that I look at podiatry and feet. And actually, when I was going through my surgical training, I left residency, went back to school. I got my master's in human movement and then came back to get my surgical license, etc. So I was trained as a surgeon. But I took a step back so that I could get my master's in human movement to really be the connector of all these different specialties or degrees that I was getting so I could really shape the practice that I have today.
Dang, that's wild. You don't hear that very often. People taking a pause and going backwards, or not backwards, but one step forward, take a bunch forward, or back to take a bunch forward. So that's cool.
It's a zig and a zag. Yeah, it's definitely a zigzag career.
Yeah, no kidding. What has it been like going from you practicing medicine or going from school and surgery to what you do today, and like the clients you see and the main things that you work on with people because you see people. Not everybody that we see who's founded a company actually sees people anymore. So it's really cool that you do that.
Yeah, it's really important that even though I'm a CEO of a fast growing company and that this is a total pun intended, but I keep one foot in the podiatry industry just so that I stay relevant, because a big part of Naboso's growth is the content and the education that we create. I'm constantly ideating new products that can help improve movement and a new application of our sensory stimulation, etc. So for that, I have to stay relevant in the industry. I have to understand still the needs of the patient and the consumer. So even though I see patients, I see them very, very minimally. And then my practice has become very boutique, very niche. I see really primarily chronic patients, chronic pain, chronic movement disorders, chronic connective tissue injuries, and then that's where I'll put my focus.
Wow.
Got
How
it.
do you
I love
balance
it.
it all? Like you're a CEO, you're a practicing physician, you're a mom. Like you have, you clearly keep up with your athletics. Like how do you stay organized and balance it all?
I'm very scheduled, like very type A. I definitely wake up every morning, and I don't know if anyone says YOLO anymore, but I totally say YOLO. Where I'm just like YOLO, and I just wake up or carpe diem. I'm like, let's go, let's do it, let's crush it. And then I have my Starbucks venti, espresso that's definitely getting me through the day as well. But I don't know. I'm so motivated by the results of what we hear through the different Naboso products or content that I create, that to hear how it's helping people actually inspires me to keep pushing and driving these different businesses forward.
That's badass. Have you always had this set level of energy? Like wake up, seize the day, like let's go? Or where'd you learn that from? Who would you learn that from?
Probably my mom. My mom is a little bumblebee. It's everywhere she goes. She's just floating around, buzzing around, doing things. You would probably not be surprised to know that I walk very fast. I drive fast. I do everything fast. I'm like, let's go, let's crush it. I'm doing this. I totally got that from my mom. And the ironic thing is that I'm from North Dakota, and I grew up in a town of 300 people. So somehow, despite being in small town North Dakota, you have this I'm just like, yeah, let's go, which is why I moved to New York City, and I lived in New York City for 20 years.
Wow. That's awesome. I do a lot of work. I specialize with anxious achievers, people that are like type A, high drive, let's fucking go. How do you balance like journey and destination, or like hard driving, gas pedaling and brake pedal and relaxing and balance? Like, I'd be so curious to know.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that you said that word though, because it's like, hi, my name is Emily and I'm an anxious achiever. Definitely. I know. I think it's understanding for me, what does self-care or calibration look like for me? It's not going to be the same for everyone. For me, it's not sitting there and meditating and journaling. And when I do that, it does help me. But what helps me even more is if I do aerials, or I'm learning to do ballroom with my boyfriend. And it's something that forces me in the present moment. So I have to be forced into the present for me to find a calmness and a recalibration. Typically it's movement meditation, you could say, but it's definitely something more like that.
Wow. I love that. I hear that. For me, it's basketball. I play basketball. That gets me in the present. It's the same. It's this kinesthetic type movement type stuff. So that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, we're all former athletes, so I think that's our home, right? Like I just feel so at home when I'm working out, when I'm moving, when we're doing fitness. It's nice to.
It is. I love that. Yeah, I love that you said that. So last week I went to the Simone Biles performance with my daughter, and I told you I was a gymnast. So it was very emotional for me to go to something gymnastics based. And they did this homage to gymnastics, and they kept calling it home. I get so emotional thinking about it. And I was like, that's exactly what you're saying, that it's like, I feel at home when I'm using my body, which is also, that's a big reason why I went into human movement based profession. And I educate and travel around the world teaching about human movement, because movement is to me home. It speaks to my soul. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. And then you're also helping people to do this movement for as long as possible. And I think that's where a lot of people too, as they age, it's really scary to lose the ability to have movement, because it brings us so much joy and peace in our lives. And so I think this is a really good segment.
Movement. Yeah, movement is life, is what I often say.
Yes, so much. So talk to us about like the role that foot health and our posture plays in our overall health and longevity.
Yeah. So the way that I look at movement as a podiatrist, a functional podiatrist, is that our movement experience or our movement story starts with our feet. So it starts with the way that we relate to the ground, the way that we relate to every step that we're taking. Our posture starts with our feet. So I'm just very connected to that story. And when you look at really the evolution or the progression of modern movements, like bipedalism, standing on our feet, there's just this necessary component of how the foot relates to the ground. Why are there thousands of nerves in the bottom of the feet? It's there for a reason. It's talks to the rest of our body on how to stand up and how to relate to gravity and the surfaces. So it's, again, just kind of interesting or unique that I fell into this profession based off of my passion for movement. And that story begins with my specialty, which is feet.
Could you walk through just a basic podiatrist 101? Because I swear I have heard podiatrists are feet that do knees, that do hips, I'm just like, what is this profession? I thought, help me just understand the 101 version of that, please.
Yeah. So a podiatrist versus, let's say, a medical doctor, an orthopedist, a foot and ankle orthopedist. A podiatrist, we go through podiatry school. So we go through our own version of a medical school. It's 4 years, just like an orthopedist, you could say, or a medical doctor. And then we have to do 3 or 4 years of surgical residency. We essentially have to become foot and ankle surgeons to get licensed. And then once you're licensed, you could decide, do you want to be a surgeon or do you not want to be a surgeon? But that's kind of the path of where they push you versus, let's say, orthopedists. They start as just general medical school. They specialize into orthopedic medicine, and then they subspecialize into the foot and the ankle. So the paths are very similar. Podiatry that's all that we learn, or that's a majority of what we learn is. Now, unfortunately, because podiatry has become so surgical, most people's experience with podiatry is they had nothing to offer me except tell me to do surgery. They had nothing to offer me except orthotics and custom shoes. They had nothing to offer me but send me to physical therapy because we're unfortunately taught very narrow. It's just the nature of the education process for podiatry school, similar to a lot of medical school. And then I chose to essentially choose these other specialties. I studied under fascial specialists. I studied under breathwork specialists, pelvic floor specialists. So I sought that on my own because I knew that there was so much more to what I could offer patients. And then a lot of the biopsychosocial, I mentioned that I see primarily chronic patients. And as soon as you get a chronic anything in the medical space, you start to bring emotion into it. So I started to see this complexity of emotional processing and emotional identity to their diagnoses. So I've done a lot of exploration in holotropic breathing, somatic, so all this exploration for me to understand my patients and that they're not going to get better unless we address the emotion that's tied to the diagnosis.
That is freaking awesome. Could you be any more specific? Like, do you have any examples of like emotional things that you have found that have helped work with a chronic issue that they were facing?
Well, so one example of what's coming to mind is, I don't know if you've ever heard of dystonia. So dystonia is this isolated muscle spasticity. Sometimes it occurs like in the traps. I see it though in patients in their calf. So in the calf or some of the lower leg muscles. And oftentimes it's trauma related, meaning emotionally trauma, that there's something triggering them and they're housing the emotional processing into that muscle. And then because of this dystonia or this spasticity, when their autonomic nervous system becomes very sympathetic, fight or flight, right? It's just elevated, it will trigger the spasticity. And that's in general, that's even with complex regional pain syndrome, is if they start to get anxious or excited about the pain in the foot, it'll actually make the pain worse. So then it's really understanding, how do you understand how to regulate the autonomic nervous system? It could just be traditional meditation. It could be understanding for them what works for them so that they don't get triggered, which increases their symptoms.
Wow. That's wild. What is it that, again, most, I feel like doctors, period, don't think about any of this stuff. What is it that, why did you decide to do all these other extra things and study all these other extra things? What led to that? What was the inkling?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like an empath or what, but something that I just would feel. And I remember being in New York City, because that's where I practiced for 10 years before I moved to Arizona. And I would be seeing these chronic neuropathy patients. So it's idiopathic. So imagine getting this diagnosis of chronic nerve pain in your foot. And the doctors are like, don't know the reason. It's idiopathic, no known cause. And they're just like, what? There's so much emotion. And, why did this happen? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to happen to another part of my body? Right? Things like that I started to just see how emotionally taxing it was to them. And then I would just see more, and then I would be curious. I've gone through my own stuff. I've been a patient. I've tore my rectus abdominis, ruptured it off my pubic bone. So I was then a patient as well to see the emotion that an injury had on me and my ability to move. And it was so emotionally difficult for me to process being a highly competitive athlete. And now I'm forced to only walk in the pool against pool resistance. And that's the only thing I could do based off of that time of the recovery. And I just remember it being very emotional. And the doctors really weren't acknowledging that. They weren't treating me like a human. I was a patient, right? Subtle difference. Even me being trained as a surgeon, I've had surgery. I have had more surgeries than a lot of people I know just from like sports injuries and things like that, where unless you've been on a surgical table and you're laying there in the sterile operating room and it's cold and they're like quickly doing things and things are buzzing, it can be very disconcerting for a patient. That when I would do surgery, I would be very honoring the experience of that patient as they're being put under, as they're going into the room, even if it's just a hammer toe. I'm like, it's still a surgery. A surgery is a surgery, and you're in this room and this experience that you've never had before. I have to respect that. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I'll blame my mama and it's very like me on
Bumblebee.
that. I don't know. The bumblebee. Yes, I am totally my mom. But yeah, so I try to feel and give space to my patients and honor what they're going through and then guide them. I am not a therapist. I'm not an expert on trauma and emotional processing. I'm not an expert in somatics, but I appreciate it so that I can guide them and tell them, you know, there's more. Human nervous system is so complex that there's more. Let's understand it, or you understand yours. Let's understand your triggers. And then that actually does help a lot of those that are ready to do that work and are open to it.
Wow.
I really love that.
That's awesome. I'm curious this is a random thought that came to my head, because you keep mentioning athlete and then you're also trained as a doctor. Which do you think is more helpful to you, your training as an athlete or your training as a doctor applied in business?
I think that's actually a really good question. I've never been asked that. My initial gut is to go to the athlete in the sense that he's like, oh yeah, go athlete. I'm very self-disciplined. I am very focused. I do not need someone to tell me to, do X, Y, Z. Similar, we're all athletes here, but gymnastics is you go on the beam and you do that routine over and over and over without anyone telling you that to do that, right? It's a matter of self-discipline. So that's a very important part of being a CEO and just a business owner is you got to have the drive. You have to have intrinsic motivation. I'm intrinsically motivated. I'm not extrinsically motivated. I love monetary success, but I'm more intrinsically motivated in what I do.
And what specifically
motivates
you?
Did you hear Chloe's question?
What was that?
No, I didn't. And sorry, what specifically is motivating you?
I mean, it sounds maybe a little hokey, but it generally is to help people and help people. Naboso has been by far the greatest success stories and emotional moving stories that I have had with just my patient care, my direct patient care. And then I will teach other professionals to treat patients in the way that I do. And then they will help patients and share with me that. So that's very inspiring as well. But to have someone, let's say with MS or Parkinson's or a spinal cord injury, and they haven't felt their feet in 10 years, 15 years, they can feel their feet again when they use our socks and with our insoles, which means they can now go for a walk on their own. They can walk their dog. We have this woman, we did a story about her, but she now goes up the stairs. She does these things. Her doctors are like, how are you doing this? And she's so moved by this ability to connect to her feet and her posture and her movement again, that it's very emotional to see it because they're emotional. We have videos of them crying when they're like, oh my God, I haven't felt my feet in 10 years. I can feel my feet. Just how powerful that is. So it's a really quality of life shift. And that to me, really powerful. So that would be the intrinsic motivation is the impact. So my goal with Naboso, whatever I do, is to it become more of like a legacy, that it's something that is beyond me. It it can help people. It could be something within the medical space, the neuro rehab space, that is far beyond when I am still practicing.
Hell yes. I
That's
love
really
that.
beautiful.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's bad to have the mission to help people. I think that's awesome. Number of people we've talked to on here that are like, well, it was just the best thing to make a buck. It was the quickest ROI that I could think of. It's just like, what the hell? Like, that's not the same as what you just articulated. So, which is a great transition into Naboso. Like, how did you think of this? Because there's patents, there's all sorts of wild stuff there's so much more than just this ball or these freaking socks that I'm wearing right now. Let's go.
Yes. So I'll step back here as far as my journey into the whole barefoot science space, because that has a little bit of a context on it. I had said that I went back and I got my master's in human movement. That was 2009, 8, 9, 10, like around that period. And during that period I went back, and it happened to be when the barefoot running boom was. And I decided to specialize and focus my master's on barefoot science. So just what is the science of the feet? How do the feet connect to the rest of the body, to our breath, to our diaphragm, all of that. And that's what I had focused on 2008, 9, 10. So I started creating education and courses that shared the way that I was looking at feet and movement. And that's my education company. I created a barefoot training specialist certification. That was in 2012. Traveling the world, speaking about getting out of shoes, strengthen the feet, wake up the feet, get your feet connected to your pelvic floor, all the stuff that I do. And then started to kind of question and say, well, there's got to be more than just take off your shoes, do short foot, which is one of my exercises. So I started to think about, well, what surface do you stand on? Like if you're getting out of your shoes, if you're going through the effort of getting out of your shoes, well, then what, right? Does it matter if I'm on carpet versus a wrestling mat versus the rubber tiling of a gym? So that got me to start exploring surface science and the way that surfaces feed the nervous system, stimulate the nervous system. Every surface is slightly different. So I came into textured research. This is texture. Started seeing some profound research around the power of texture, different types of texture. So I just started speaking about it when I was traveling. And then people were like, well, where do you get the texture? How can I implement this with my athletes or with my patients, et cetera? And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know how to take the research and make it into something because it didn't exist. It was just being researched, published, and then no one was doing anything with this data that was actually demonstrating it improved the way that people moved and felt their feet, et cetera. So long story short of it is that I was approached by an engineer when I was consulting with another company, and he happened to leave that company, and he said, you sound like you have some ideas on different products, et cetera, that you could innovate. And to me, that was just the world speaking to me and saying, this is your time to kind of explore this idea of where I've been questioning things. Did not think it would become what Naboso is today. It was really initially just this textured barefoot training surface that I created, which is still our mats. So we have mats. And they've evolved a little bit, but our training mat is essentially our first product. And then people said, put this in insoles. And someone who happened to use the insoles had MS, and it just exploded this utility within neuro rehab. And then we started developing products specifically for neuro rehab. And then here we are today.
Wow. That's wild. So it just exploded from the initial mat all the way through all the different products today. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think what's important is that when you had asked of this kind of like doctor athlete, initially my focus is so much in the fitness and the athletic space. So when I think about minimal shoes, barefoot science, I think from how is that going to help an athlete? How is that going to help a runner? How does that NFL player respond to strengthening their foot or stimulating the foot? That's initially where I went. And then when we started to see just people organically coming to us with these neurological conditions, that's where we started doing it. Similar with children, people their own would use it for like autism, then come back to us and we're like, oh my gosh, here's this utility. And then we would push into how these users were telling us they were using our products.
So I know we've talked a little bit about some of the like what's going on, but mechanistically inside of the nervous system, inside of the physiology, inside of the foot, inside of the muscles, inside of all the things, like you're like, it helps with autism, it helps with MS, it helps with this. What specifically is it doing? And why does the texture help? And like, what, if you were to go a little bit deeper, we can go deeper here. I would love to know that.
Yeah. So what Naboso is stimulating, and if people don't know Naboso, they are balls, mats, weighted products, release tools, everything that has these tiny little pyramids on them. So the entire surface of it is covered with a 1.5 millimeter tall pyramid or a texture. Those triangles or the pyramids are stimulating a very special nerve in your hands and in your feet. It is really touch nerves. They're called mechanoceptors. But there's a very specific one that we are stimulating, which is sensitive to Braille. So Braille is essentially texture, or really it's 2-point discrimination. That's really what this is. We say texture to the consumer, but it's 2-point discrimination. It has a name. It's called the SA1 Merkel disc. It's found on the feet. It's found in the hand. And we are stimulating that through our products to wake up the nervous system so you can feel the feet, wake up the muscles. It stimulates circulation, increases perception, so you can connect to where you are in space. That's really what we're trying to do, is help people feel their body. And when you can feel your body, you can feel your posture, your movement. It calms your autonomic nervous system. Your movement accuracy goes up. Your falls go down. Your recovery increases. So you get all these benefits when you can connect and feel your body.
And is there any research on like how those benefits are acquired by those receptors being stimulated by the texture? Is there anything like mechanistically that's happening, or a release of X, Y, and Z or something like that?
So it is your mechanoceptors, which is the touch, hands and feet, is stimulating the somatosensory cortex. So it works with proprioception. Proprioception and mechanoception fall under somatosensation. So somatosensation is essentially body perception, right? And then it's stimulating a part of your neocortex, which helps to feed this picture of your body in space. So that component of it. There is a secondary one, which is a little bit more autonomic nervous system. It's not necessarily releasing like a hormone or anything like that, but there's research showing that touch is analgesic. Touch can be very calming to the nervous system. So that's how we would connect to the use this, see this, was from that.
It makes a lot of sense. It'd be interesting to understand, because touch also is known to produce like oxytocin. And oxytocin, the most receptors in the entire body are the vagus nerve. And so if there's more oxytocin in your blood, you activate your vagus nerve, which can calm you down and relax you. So that's interesting. Have you heard of the homunculus? Okay, that is what when you were talking about somatic sensory, I was like, oh my God, this is like if your homunculus was footless, this could like stimulate what's the nerves in your feet to put that light back up those homunculus like portion of the somatosensory cortex that represents the feet and stuff. Is that directionally accurate, or does that make any sense?
Yep. 100%. So if the listeners know what the homunculus is and they connect to that, obviously, you know, your hands, your feet, and your mouth are the biggest part of the homunculus. So it is, how do we stimulate that? When I do work with patients who do have neurological injury or high level plates, etc., I will always utilize the hands and the feet at the same time. And then there's interesting research about connecting to the homunculus, which is exteroceptive, by coupling it interoceptively. So trying to bring the breath and awareness of the breath and the internal environment while you have an external stimuli, such as the neural ball, you're holding the ball, you have the socks. So you're actually trying to bridge exteroception with interoception because they're very close in the brain as far as where they're processed.
That is awesome. And for people who don't know the homunculus, it is literally just a map. Neurosurgeons have just poked around in there enough that they have mapped specific maps of the neocortex, specific in the somatosensory cortex, that represents your hands, your mouth, your face, every single part of your body is represented up there. So, and it looks like a human. And people have, based on the number of nerves that represent each portion of your body, the homunculus is, that part of the homunculus is bigger or smaller. So our hands, our feet, our mouth, our tongue, all of that stuff is huge, while some of our other areas are much, much smaller. So it's interesting. Yeah, definitely Google homunculus if you haven't yet, because it is a jarring image. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate you diving a little bit deeper into some of the details. That stuff is very interesting to me. So I would love to hear some of the wildest success stories of like Naboso. You talked about MS, you talked about autism. Like, is there any that really like sit with you a lot or that you share often? Or maybe one that you don't share often, but is like a good one.
I mean, I've spoken a lot about the neurological injury one, and those honestly are the best example because you're taking someone with a deficit. And this is the way that I think about Naboso, or really any stimulus that we provide, is that it's considered noise, right? So textures, noise, vibration, sound, light, all of it is noise to your nervous system. And oftentimes I will say that people can't hear the noise. If someone has neuropathy, so they have numbness in their feet, they can't hear the noise of the stimulus of their feet, of the ground. So we need to turn the volume up to the noise. Use a neural ball, put on the socks. I'm turning the volume up to the noise of the stimulus so they can hear it. If that makes sense. So anytime you're working with someone who has a deficit, you will see a more profound effect. So one example, one condition where this has the most profound effect is Parkinson's. Wow. And Parkinson's is different than MS in that it presents differently. You can see a much more immediate effect on the nervous system when they use Naboso. So an example of what we see with Parkinson's patients is that they will walk down the hallway, walk back without the Naboso insoles or socks. Put the Naboso insoles or socks in, they walk again, they're suddenly standing upright, they're not freezing. We've had people using a cane and literally they're in the middle of walking and they throw the cane and they're like, I'm walking like this. We have them that they start running as soon as they do it. And we're like, whoa, you haven't run in like 10 years. And they start running again. So there's something really profound with Parkinson's, specifically with the Naboso texture, as far as a profound effect. Another one, children. And children who use our products, and these are children who are somewhere on the spectrum, ADHD, autism, etc. But they just need to feel their body a little bit more. Is we will give them our sensory sticks, and our sensory sticks are 2-pound weighted sticks. So it's a combination of our texture with weight. So it's actually 2 different neurostimuli that they're experiencing. And it's actually very calming. And we've had lots of parents send us photos of their kid sitting quietly, holding the sticks. They'll use it when they're studying. So they actually have these really powerful effects with that combination of weight and texture. The last one that I'll mention real quick that has to do with children is toe walkers. If you have a toe walking child and you have them release their feet with the texture or use our insoles or socks, they'll actually bring their foot down and they will no longer toe walk. So those are just a few of the effects that we'll see.
That's interesting. I'm curious, in relation to like physical things, like what about like flat feet? Like I hear that all the time with athletes and stuff.
So our foot type creates the foundation through which the rest of our body is going to essentially hold itself up. Our posture, our skeleton sets the base through which our muscles contract. So if you do not have a stable skeleton, your feet are collapsed, your feet are less stable, your posture can start to be less stable, which means the muscles don't have a stable base to contract against. Does that mean that your glutes might be a little bit slower, your deep core pelvic floor a little bit slower, your reaction time, things where you potentially would get hurt? Now, A does not always equal B, and that's the one thing that I've also learned just through my experience, which is different than what I was taught in school. Podiatrists are taught that if you have this, they must be in an orthotic. If you have flat feet, you must be an orthotic or you will get hurt. See, that's not true because I see thousands of feet and professional athletes who have very flat feet and are not in orthotics and they're not hurt. But so I try to not make direct associations such as that.
Interesting. I've always been told I need orthotics because I have flat feet, but so I'm just curious. I'm starting to use the socks and the ball and all the stuff now. So I'm like, all right, let's do this thing.
Yeah. You don't necessarily, I don't know what your feet look like, but so I cannot say, or I will not say, no, you don't need orthotics. I always try to do a educated recommendation when I say things, but will you find a benefit from releasing your feet and using the Naboso socks? Absolutely, because your flat feet have to work a little bit harder than someone who doesn't have flat feet. And that's all that we're going to think about right now.
So if someone was like completely new to Naboso and all this kind of stuff, what would be the best way to start? Is there one product or exercise you recommend?
So I would say by releasing your feet using the neural ball, which is what you have. You've showed it split open, right? So it's a ball that splits into the two pieces, the two domes. That is one of the best ways to start a healthy foot habit. So not only do I want people to be utilizing Naboso, but I want them to be thinking about foot health as a priority. The first and easiest step for that is to release your feet every day. I tell people, take the neural ball, split it into the two pieces, leave it in front of your bathroom sink, and then stand on it when you brush your teeth, morning and evening. So you're getting at least 2 releases every day, even if it's 2 minutes. Perfect. Great. Love it. The next way that I would incorporate that or segue that in could be our toe spacers. Our toe spacers are great. Toe spacers are very passive in the way that you would use them. So you would slide them on at the end of the day. They essentially open up the foot and straighten the toes. They're stretching the entire front of the foot, increasing circulation. When you're in shoes all day, stretching your toes just feels amazing. And then just walk around your home, cook dinner, whatever it is that you're going to do, but you're doing it with the toe spacers on. The next thing I would suggest as far as the different products would be like the socks that you have on, Cody, is instead of the toe spacers, he's like, yes, I'm doing it correct. Instead of the toe spacers, I would say slide on the socks at the end of the day, walk around, cook dinner, do what you would do anyway, and you are recovering your feet, stimulating your feet, and you really haven't changed anything else in your habits. And that's how I look at foot health from a realistic approach that I want to increase compliancy. I make it easy, I make it passive, I make it effective.
That is really simple. Yeah, just to wear the socks, run the toes, stop adding in a bunch of crazy exercises. Are there any like foot health things that you're like absolutely do this? Like, what are the worst things that we can do for our feet?
I would say one of the worst things that you could do for your foot health long term is to be in shoes all day, every day. So we want to get out of our shoes. And even if you need shoes for work, you need cushion for work, you have orthotics, because maybe you do have ligament laxity or something like that, you still want to find a moment to be barefoot, to get that sensory stimulation. I'm a big fan of grounding and being outside on the grass barefoot or the dirt barefoot. So try to incorporate that. It does not need to be a long period. I tell people 30 minutes a day. So can you just get out of your shoes 30 minutes a day? We do not need them on all day, every day. Research has actually shown that if you chronically wear shoes, that you get atrophy and denervation of the muscles in the bottom of the feet. So we want to avoid that.
Yikes. That's a wild time. I would love to, you've mentioned so many different types of people. Who is, like, in your head, the ideal customer or person you want using your products?
I mean, I'm going to keep it broad. If you have feet and a pulse, there you go. That is who we want to use our products. Honestly, though, you don't have to have foot pain to benefit from thinking about your feet. Again, if we just want to go with the neural ball release or just not even with the Naboso product, stand on a golf ball, lacrosse ball, something is just prioritizing your foot health. So that is literally everyone. You do not have to have foot pain to start your foot health journey. You do not have to have a fall risk. You do not have to have a neurological condition or stroke or MS. You don't have to be an athlete. It's really everyone. We want to make this a priority.
The other question, we talked a lot about the research. We usually have a section where we do a little bit more, like, dive into that, which we already did. But I'm curious, there's a lot of research that was based on previous research. Like, what do you guys do to validate the effectiveness today? Do you do other clinical trials? Do you do research? Is it anecdotal from, like, reviews? Like, what do you do to keep up with that stuff?
So we've done several pilots at Naboso. A pilot that we do is subjective. So it's looking at the 2 main pilots that we did. We did a neuropathy pilot, and then we did a standing employee pilot. And that was saying, okay, do you have foot pain? Do you have fatigue? Do you have entire musculoskeletal fatigue? Use the Naboso insoles when you are at work all day, every day for your 8 to 10 hour shift. After 6 weeks, reassess. How do you feel? Right? So that's a subjective. There's still value to subjective data, right? Because if you feel good, you are going to move better. So those actually had really good results. The one that we actually did it at Stanley Black & Decker with 40 of their employees who were standing on a warehouse floor or a manufacturing floor and had like 87% decrease in foot pain, back pain, fatigue. So it was really profound effects. Yeah, it was really, really great. And that was just demonstrating, yes, my feet are important to the way that I stand and I move. That's really what I extrapolated from it. And then texture is a way to stimulate it. Now, in addition to that, our neuropathy one, we had lots of people that said that they felt their feet again after 10 years, 15 years not feeling their feet. And did that increase in foot awareness change the way that you moved? Did it increase your movement confidence? And that was like 85% or something said that they noticed an increase in movement confidence. That's pilots. Now, actual A/B controlled research studies, Naboso can't do that because of a bias. So we actually have worked with several facilities. Sloan Kettering out of New York City just did a study, and they did it with spinal cord lesions and chemo-induced neuropathy. They are publishing their data now. We did another one with MS. With the MS Mendel Center, and they looked at the effect of our insoles on gait parameters, and they're publishing theirs right now. Temple Podiatry School did a diabetic neuropathy one. So yes, we do have research that is being done with our products now to further validate them.
That's awesome. And are there any other objective measures y'all look at, like, or that maybe some of the studies have started to look at, like HRV or heart rate or sleep or anything like a Whoop or something like that could measure?
We haven't. I think that would be another really good one. Most people, when they think about texture feet, they go towards kind of gait, movement, fall, balance. So within that category, foot pain, right? That could be one as well. Maybe a performance. We also did a golf pilot. I forgot to mention that we did a golf pilot, and on that one was similar. How did your performance affect? How was your swing, right? How did that affect it? One aspect of our product that I'm interested in is the circulation. So that could be looking at foot temperature before and after using the products, and then what does that have, right? So that's kind of carrying into it. I like the HRV one. I like kind of the sleep component, the emotional regulation, stuff like that. Those things are very multifactorial, so it's kind of hard to get it into truly controlled, but like it. And people continuously research texture, which is exciting.
That's amazing. So what's next for Naboso? What are you working on and working towards?
Yes, so we have some hand products that we're coming out with, which I'm very excited for.
Whoa.
Yes. So those are coming out this holiday. It's a hand stimulation, which is great for kind of in the space of children stimulation, kind of how people need to fidget per se and bring in sensory stimulation. That's one utility. But then there is OT, kind of the hand aspect of occupational therapy and rehab. That's always just an aspect or a lens that we look at things. Do you want to stimulate your hands before you do a racket sport like pickleball, tennis, etc.? Could be a way. But the utility of our texture is not just for feet. We have those exact same nerves in our hand, and the hands need similar attention, recovery, etc. So that's big. And then we are working on a couple other products in the hand space. I cannot disclose those yet. And then I have another book that's coming out. So my first book, which is called Barefoot Strong, that's been out for a while. I have another book that's called Sensory Sapiens, and that is launching this holiday as well.
Whoa.
So cool.
Are you able to share like the topics of that, or like the big picture, broad strokes?
Yeah, so it's really looking at, so we were speaking about it the entire time, but we truly are sensory beings, and that's the sensory sapien kind of aspect of it. I feel that the optimization of movement and therefore the optimization of longevity, which is very trending right now, the longevity market is just booming, is that a critical component of that is the movement piece. But the way that we move is very much correlated to our connection and our perception of self internally and externally. And I just feel with technology and Zooming and all of this that we've become disassociated beings, society, and we actually need to get more associated, more in touch with ourselves internally and externally. So this is hopefully helping people do that. Send you both a copy.
Please do. So you had mentioned this a little bit, like longevity, the future scientific discoveries? Like, what do you think if you had to put on like your futurist hat? Like, what scientific discovery or innovation do you think could dramatically change the world in the next like 10 to 20 years?
Say something with the emotion, something emotional.
Mhm.
I'm a, what I think what would help humanity move forward, just thinking of all these like wars and all of that, is there's generational trauma that if we could somehow truly get past this generational association to just past experiences that we then carry forward, whether it's my ancestors were experiencing this, so then it's still in my blood and in my bones to feel an emotional response to that. Because we can't proceed forward if we keep living in the past of these experiences. And that's for humanity. This is just humanity in general, is how do we become more unified versus segmented?
Damn, that's so good. I ask clients that all the time, like, is this your burden or someone else's? And they say, so often they say it's someone else's. So I agree with that. That's good. No one said an emotional thing. I'm so happy that you did. Good work, Dr. Emily.
There you go.
I'm unbiased.
Such an empath.
All right. So we generally like to end with, as we're kind of bringing it in for a landing here, with some signature questions.
I'm excited.
They're exciting. The first one we always love to ask is, what's a question that you wish more people asked you?
Okay. Yes, here's mine. Call it if this is how you want to word it. But in your next life, what would you want to come back and do? Like career or focus?
Okay.
Mine, and I'm curious.
Yes, what's your answer?
Mine is I want to be a performer for Cirque du Soleil.
It's so cool.
Now I'm too old. That ship has sailed, but I would love to be a Cirque du Soleil performer.
That's why. Why? Where did that come from? Like,
well, I do aerials, and aerials is one of my therapy because it's really dangerous. I do silks and straps, and you have to be present because it's so high up, and you're doing drops and these things that you have to be very, very present the entire time, or you could die. So to me, it's one of the most moving methods. And then you're also flying, or there's this semblance of flying.
dang, that's awesome. I think I'd want to either be like a Tibetan monk type person that is just completely in nirvana and cool with not anxiously achieving his whole life, or a comic book writer that then also makes movies and stuff. That would be amazing.
Oh my God.
How about you, Chloe?
I don't know. I don't know what to come back and
I love that question.
I'll get back to you guys.
I love that. That's a great one.
The next question. So what's a partnership or connection that would really help you rather than just giving you money?
Partnership that I would want outside of then giving advice?
Or money?
No, money.
Outside of money.
Mhm.
What is a partnership that I want outside of money?
Yeah, we love connecting people. We talk to tons of cool people. So
Say outside of money, a partnership would be, I mean, I'm into like kind of the TED Talk motivation thing. So I'd maybe say something like that.
like an opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Or like a badass coach who's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to get you fired up. Teach you how to motivate people as like a keynote. That side.
Huh. Okay. I know, been a Toastmasters for years, so I know lots of people like that.
Well, there we go.
But yeah, that's cool. All right. The next thing that we ask is, the last guest that we had is the CEO of DoNotAge.org. His name's Alan. And the question that he left for you is, in the last 12 months, how have you supported the science of longevity?
I would say through new products developed at Naboso.
That's an easy one for you.
Because it's my favorite topic. Yes. Do not age. Yes, that is a topic I love.
Okay. And the final question, we'll pass this on to the next person we interview. So what's a question that maybe we should have asked you that we should ask the next wellness company?
But I'm in my 40s now. So what is a wellness belief that I now understand at this stage that I wish I understood in my 20s? Does that question make sense?
Interesting. Yeah. It makes complete sense. That's a good one. All right, sweet. I can't remember who we're interviewing next, but they're going to love that question. Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with, or any place that you'd like them to follow you or check out? We'll put all of the website and socials in the description, obviously, but anything else?
Yeah, people want to learn more. My first book is called Barefoot Strong. It's available on Amazon. It's also on the Naboso website or barefootstrong.com. My Instagram handle is the Functional Foot Doc. And then where I see patients, most of my patients are virtual, so I see patients around the world, is thefunctionalfootdoc.com. And then for Naboso, the website is naboso.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on with us. We really appreciate your time.
Of course, it was so much fun.
Heck yeah. Thanks so much. If you guys haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Bye, everyone.